second in a series of conversations with an international teacher of colour. The idea of these webinars is to reach out to international schools, international organisations, and international recruitment agencies to talk about how they are making systemic changes with regards to racial equity in their institutions.
Hi, I'm Dana Watts. I'm the Director of Research and Development with International School Services. And background about myself. I've been an international educator for the majority of my career. Actually, prior to going into the international schools, I taught in higher ed. And I taught here in the States. And then when I went overseas, I started teaching uh, um, the IB program through the International School of Bangkok, and I taught there, and then in New Delhi, and then also most recently in Hong Kong. And then I began working with ISS about approximately a year and a half ago. And from there, and even prior to working with ISS, I was really involved with something called the Diversity Collaborative, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Um, and while I was overseas as well, I was one of the co-founders of an organization called W Lead, which was about really looking at how can we empower and help more women get into the pipeline of international school leadership. And then from there, that kind of evolved into the work that I've been doing with the Diversity Collaborative.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I did notice you've done quite a bit of work to try to empower women in positions of leadership. And I'm assuming that's what sort of really empowered you to sort of continue that work with ISS.
Yes, very much so. And for years as an educator, I always felt as if, why are all the male, pale, and stale people leading the schools? And so I felt as if women, I really wanted to see more equity for women. I thought there was a huge difference in between even schools that said we're doing this well and we have equity within our faculty and our school leadership teams. Too often the front of house and that leadership was being led by men, and the women were in the background in curriculum, in admissions, in special student services, but students weren't seeing them on a regular basis. They weren't seeing them in assemblies. They didn't know their names. They didn't know what their role was within the school. And so I was trying to figure out how we could help get more women into the pipeline. But through that work, it quickly became apparent to me it wasn't just women, and that there were all the different nationalities, religions, backgrounds. That there was just no equity, there was no diversity, and so that kind of started my work with the Diversity Collaborative, and I started working with Liz and the crew over at ISS. And then from there, they invited me they have a yearly women's symposium based on the work of Marianne House. And they pull in approximately 30 plus women per summer, at least they used to, and to help network and empower them. And through them, I started hearing more and more about the work that ISS did, and that's how I ended up working with International School Services.
Great. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it must have been an amazing journey to sort of get there, and with your experience as a teacher and then going into ISS and sort of leading from and through that organisation. So leading on to that and talking about ISS itself, why is ISS committed to change?
Well, one of our core values has always been around equity, and I think that COVID has kind of really shined a light on the inequity of international schools more so than ever. And so, in addition to the work that we do with the Diversity Collaborative, my big initiative and the focus of a lot of my work has been around professional learning. And how do we, in the past, the schools that had all the money had all the PD. So they could afford, $4,000, $6,000, $10,000 a day to fly in a consultant, pay a first class ticket, make sure they stay at a hotel, make sure, they're wined and dined the whole time. And then their teachers were able to get that professional development. However, what about all the rest of the schools? What about our host country schools? What about schools that don't have that type of money or gravitas to be able to pull them in? So we started running professional development, especially when COVID first hit. We started running, just trying to connect all our teachers who were overseas, who had been online on their own and figuring it out, with all the teachers who were finding out that they had to go online. So like March, we were packed. And so we started doing panels where we would have anywhere from 3 to 5 teachers who had already been teaching online just sit in a panel and answer questions and say, hey, here's a conversation. This is what we did. Don't do this, do this. And so quickly we went from 60 people showing up to those to 1,000. So then we started to figure out, okay, how else can we, obviously there's a thirst for professional learning, and how do we make this more widely distributable so that more teachers are able to get it. And so that's the equity piece. So we started running really inexpensive professional development this summer in content areas. And now we're running, like right now I'm running a workshop with Ken O'Connor and 2 of my other colleagues, Laura Benson and Josh Bishop. But schools, if you're a small school, if you're a school in Madagascar and you have 11 teachers, you can't afford to bring Ken O'Connor in to learn about standards-based grading and reporting. But you can spend $150 and take it, or whatever, whatever the amount is, and you can take it all, within your school right now. And it's become, so there's an equity piece that is my thing, is I just want all teachers to feel like they're able to do their best, give their best selves to the students, because you teach a teacher and you're teaching tons of students. And so to me, that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, it's an
I
opportunity.
geeked out there on the PD, sorry.
All right.
I geeked out on the PD, I'm sorry.
Right, it's good. I mean, that's the thing. It's giving those who don't have the opportunity to step up and do something online. This is a perfect time to do that, and it's accessible and low cost. And there's a lot out there now for a lot of people doing these types of things in lots of different sort of arenas.
I think online also offers an equity piece in that, in the past, if I was going to walk into a room and I'm the only person that looks like me or whatever, right? It's much harder to figure out how to break in. In an online experience, okay, I'm not going to jump into a conversation but what I might do is figure out in the chat, like I think the chat provides equity. I can take a moment, not be put on the spot, formulate my thoughts, and say, okay, but this is what I believe. This is what I think about this. And it gives me equal footing with everyone else in that room. And I think that's a really important component of helping people start to feel like they have a seat at the table, where in the past, even if they had that seat at the table, it was hard to figure out how you integrate in. And there's ways now because of online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen, you can see that. I think it's really easy because it's not everyone's comfortable and confident to sort of have those discussions face to face. They'll put a picture there and so forth. But the chat does allow that, and you can take your time. And also, I think what it allows is a lot of people to look at other people's comments first, to sort of say, okay, I really want to ask this question. Yes, it's okay because other people are doing this, and you don't feel sort of put on the spot. And my next question sort of leads into how you involve people in your organization and what you're doing. How do you involve all of your staff? Because you may have a group, a certain amount of people that are working on this, but how does everybody get involved in raising awareness and equity?
I think that it's interesting. So, after being overseas for so long, and then now to be housed in the United States in this particular time period, and to be in an organization that we have this real dichotomy of, you've got a lot of people who have worked overseas who are now back stateside and working with ISS, but then you also have the people who have been working in our office for 30 years and who have lived in New Jersey or in this area for a different time. So there's a lot, and we all have different ideas of what does this even mean? And so what we've done at ISS is really, we've got a bunch of different things that we're doing. So one, we've been running regular professional learning within our whole community. And we also invite anyone who, I mean, we've been remote since last March, but even people who aren't based in the Princeton office, who are in different places. You know, my associate slash assistant works in Austin. And so, you know, pulling them in and making sure that they're receiving all the same training. And we've been hiring different DEIJ specialists to come in and help us, you know, articulate, this is why it's important. This is what it looks like. This is what this work entails. And these are the tough conversations you have to have. And through that, we have a fairly extensive internal anti-racism committee, where we're looking at a couple different components. So we're looking at recruitment and retention within the international schools. We're looking at training and how do we do that. What services do we offer, and how do we make sure that those are also anti-racist? The policies and procedures that we have internally and externally at ISS, and then just the outreach that we do, and what kind of systems and structures we have in place for feedback and accountability. If someone's doing something and they don't know that they're doing it, or they do know that they're doing it, how are we reporting that? What kinds of policies? How do we help people so that we are better as an organization? And then looking at the ISS schools and how do we work with our boards to the schools that we own and manage, and train those boards so the boards have a better idea of what it means to be anti-racist, and how do they become better as an institution. And then the geeky side of me is, I'm an avid reader, and so but Liz Duffy is 100 times more of an avid reader than I am. So we have a book club, and we've gone through, I did a quick tally because I wouldn't remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're on our 7th book. But of course, the 7th book is Cast. And so this one is fairly big, but I only just got in the mail yesterday, The Warmth of Other Suns. And this one's even thicker. But I'm super excited about this one because I just heard about it yesterday. So, or 2 days ago, because it already came. But so anyway. It's been great.
Perspective on those books, because I want to sort of try and, I'm reading some myself. I'd like to try and spread awareness as well of, if people read these books, what do they really like? Yeah, I think it's really interesting to make people aware and give them those opportunities. And I think you've already spoken about making the wider community aware, and having these initiatives with the online Zooms and chats, and how that's really grown. And I think, and has that become more successful?
Oh, I think so. I think that it's hard to know, right? Like, the events that have happened in this country over the past month are mortifying to me, because I did not know that I didn't know how not only blatantly racist our country had become, but also the insane beliefs in. Someone in my family recently said that they thought January 6th was run by Black Lives Matter, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And the person's older, but I'm still just, I can't believe you could even imagine that. And so when you do the work and you have the conversations, there's the outward facing, and then there's the internal facing. And that worries me, that how much of this is in there in people that we don't see. I feel like we're just peeling back that onion or whatever, and it's in one of the conversations, I don't know, you might have even been a part of that the other day. Someone said, there's the shark in the water, but racism is not just the shark. It's the water. We've all been swimming in it, and you have to try to figure out, it's all over. And so that's the part that's saddening and overwhelming a bit. Like but I'm also really cognizant of the fact that there's, until we continue, one of my favorite Isabel Wilkinson's quotes, it's like right here on my desk, is we are responsible for our own ignorance, or with time and with open heart enlightenment, our own wisdom. And I feel like through wisdom and through education, through learning, we can be better. But you can't always account for people who have these beliefs that I just don't understand.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult to have those conversations with. Um, I found it's easier over the last, half year or so to have conversations with people who are willing to speak, but it's much harder to have conversations with those who have particular views and stances about things. But the only way we're going to move forward is if we have those conversations. And I have had a few of those, which have been quite interesting. And they have sort of led to some positivity. And I think it's important that we try to believe that we can help, or we can, because it's not just about raising awareness, because we can raise awareness with these people who believe in these things, but will that change their minds? Will that influence them? Will it have an input, an impact? Maybe, but the only way we're going to do that is if we continue to have the conversations. I was going to ask you about how you reached your goals in the organization, and with those goals, have they been through inclusive collaboration, or was it with just a particular team?
Well, so a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is just with teachers in general. They're not necessarily just international teachers, and with the professional learning that we're doing. So we've been really working on how do we, like, for example, we ran a course last month, and it was called "How do you strengthen community in blended environments?" And in the description, we talked about how do you go from safe conversations to brave conversations, and how do you help a community start to feel inclusive. But what was interesting is some people actually signed up for the course because they thought it talked about, it was about blended learning and how do you do this in a hybrid model, which is very different, right? But trying to pull in people from all different walks of life. And one of the things that so whether or not they've always been in one system, or they've been in multiple countries and multiple places, and trying to build whatever this new knowledge and new school, whatever school and education will look like in the future, which I still think has a long way to go, being more inclusive about who is a part of that conversation. I think students need to be more a part of that conversation. I think teachers often are left out of that conversation. I'm incredibly concerned about, as we move more and more into online education and what that might look like, I am scared that the Googles and the Apples will create what they think is online school, and that's corporate America, instead of educators. But then if we're going to talk about educators, we need to make sure that those educators represent all walks of life, all different types of our geography and experiences and cultures. And too often it's the same people kind of saying, well, this is what I think should be learned, and not the people who are actually doing the learning, and it's not inclusive. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm trying to build.
No, and I get it. That makes total sense, bringing in the people who are actually doing the work there in the classrooms with the kids, and how they can actually have an effect, rather than a top-down approach often, which is what may have sort of happened for many years, and it doesn't work, and so it keeps going along that train track in a way, and not really getting anywhere, and not really sort of building. And so I think the work you're doing with these other schools is extremely important, and individuals as well, within organizations, because it's you are including people, and you're sort of allowing people to join those groups and have those discussions. um, I
In
know.
our most recent course that we just did, we do a design challenge each month. And so, the design challenge was, how can we make our schools more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And so it was interesting because one of the first things that someone proposed was, an international day. Well, quickly people were like, that's not really being inclusive, and that's tokenistic, and it's not really what we want. And like, it evolved into so many different ideas sprang off of there. But if that person had not been brave enough to like say, oh, here's an idea, all these other people wouldn't have come in with additional ideas. It wasn't an attack, we don't like this idea. It was, how about this? How about this? Have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about, what about this? And so if we work from a place of together, we can construct knowledge together, and we can build something together and help those who may not have had some of these same experiences understand all the different perspectives, then we can have stronger schools. Who am I? I don't know who I am. Can I wear every country?
Which country do we choose this year?
Mm-hmm.
It's been Mauritius, it's been Poland, it's been the US, it's been the UK. And we just sort of vary. And there's 4 of us. We haven't all separated 4 different countries, but we've often teamed up together. Okay, I'm going to go with my son this year, or whatever it is. So quite funny. But yeah, I think that's a really important. I've seen different models of how people have sort of tried to incorporate internationalism in international school, which should be. But that's another discussion, I would say. Okay, so you mentioned earlier that you involved outside consultants to help you establish some pathways and things. Firstly, why did you bring in these consultants, and what was the reason behind that, really?
I think our work with the Diversity Collaborative really started a lot of these conversations. So we did a bunch of work doing the IDI and trying to figure out, okay, so who are we as an organization? What are our individual strengths and weaknesses? How can we move forward from there? But then from there, we've also done, but we had done all that prior to the past year. We did that probably two years ago. They started that work way before I started at ISS. And then, but from there, just starting to see, how do we really make an organization that traditionally has been male, pale, and stale start to represent the communities in which we serve. And so from there, we've really asked other outside consultants to come in and to help us and to see and look at different policies and procedures and things, and to train us in general. And then in addition to that, we've also we have a committee, which I'm not a part of this committee, that is looking at where is within recruiting, how can we help prepare both candidates so that and have some sort of system in place where, if a school is a safe school for whatever reason, right, that is there some sort of almost like stamp or brand that you can put on them. Because too often I've been at a recruiting fair, and if someone's in line and they might line up for what they think is the big school, right? And then you hear and you're talking to them like, what are you looking for? What do you want? And they say, oh, I want blah, 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 blah. And you're like, well, have you thought about this place? Or you're sitting there thinking you're in the wrong line. Like, you can't, they will never hire you. And you know that because even like for me, I'm a single mom with 3 kids. And I went to the top end of finalists, 1 of 2 finalists at one of the biggest international schools around, until they realized I had 3 kids and they were only going to give a visa to 1. I'm like, what 2 am I giving up? And what country am I leaving them in? Who's watching them? Like, we could have ended this conversation a million years. I don't believe how much time I spent before anyone ever gave me the heads up on that. It was only a head of school who was like, "Oh my gosh, Dana, we have to stop. We can't even go any further." So there are schools where you know that they are super supportive and friendly of LGBTQT, or really good with race, religion. But you also know there are some schools that you know no matter what, and like I don't want like a blacklist, right? Like, and which I don't even know if you can call it that, right? But like I know like a list where you say, okay, these schools are no goes, but like some of them, it's also part of their charter of the school. So I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but like I taught at the American Embassy in American Embassy School in New Delhi. You had to have a U.S. passport. So that's because that's their agreement with the US government. That makes it so it doesn't do any good to try to interview there and to get all the way through the process. And I'm not saying I agree with the policy or the arrangement that they had however many years ago, but it was part of it, right? At HKS, there's a piece, about being Lutheran, which I'm not Lutheran and I was there, but like at some point that is going to come up in the interview and it's going to come up in the conversation. We need candidates to be able to know, okay, this is a place that I know I don't need to like lay all my cards out on the table and feel vulnerable. Like I just know that this is a place worth pursuing. But also, if it's a school in my dream world, if there's a school where they say one thing and they do another, how do we hold them accountable? So we have a group of people outside of ISS that are working with our people at ISS to try to help us figure out how do we pinpoint this and how do we help make it have more accountability for that and transparency.
Really interesting because, how do you get that data out, so that everybody's aware of that? Because I mean, when you're an experienced international educator, you look out for things. You do your research. You go onto websites, and you not only do the research in the school itself and their policies and practices and their expectations and what type of school they are and so forth, but you also look at the country, and you might look at the leadership of the school as well and so forth, and you might look at, they may have some events and things that they're doing. And I think one part of making new international educators or inexperienced international educators is to be aware of those things, and that's also an onus on them to do that. But the other thing is, how do you get that information out that's sort of hidden, like you're talking about, without listing those schools as bad schools, or don't go there. I mean, I remember one experience. I won't mention the name of the school, but it was quite interesting. I was interested in a particular job at a school in a particular country, and I went up to the guy at the job fair, the head teacher, and I said, "Hi, I'm really interested in your school. You have a position." I didn't even get to hand my CV to him, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, can't take you." Straight away without it. Now, I then did my research a little bit more afterwards, and I found certain things out. Number one, about the person, and number two, about the country and the school. And so, things like this happen, and it's really important to have to be experienced and look yourself, but it's also something which I think what you're looking into would be really important for educators out there.
I did reach out to International Schools Review, ISR, and I believe last I spoke to them, they were thinking about adding criteria into their process where you could rate a school or a school leader on their DEIJ efforts and policies and procedures, which I think that's probably the right place for that to exist if you're going to go. I do want to keep things for the most part highlight the people who are doing good things, right? But when people consistently, such as the person you were just talking about, say things and do things that are not appropriate, there needs to be a place. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard things, at one point I was told, why should I ever make you an overseas hire? Because no man will ever follow a woman for a job, so you will never be the primary hire. And I was like, but I'm it. Like there's I don't understand that. And but like there's all these comments, right? That you hear throughout. So many people have them. How can you not
You do it in a way that's professional and not derogatory, as opposed to the people. I mean, my thoughts are: why are we protecting schools that aren't doing the right thing? But,
Mhm.
yeah, but you have to be careful not to attack them.
Yeah.
That's a
And you
balance.
have to be careful that it's not this one disgruntled employee who's going to try to destroy someone's career, right? Because you see that, and you can't always make everyone happy, but then you also, so there has to be some sort of balance, but I don't know what that is. But they've gotten away with it for too long. We all know it.
Yeah, and I think at the moment now we have momentum, and there's a lot happening in the world, and I think there will be change. It will be gradual, but I think maybe before it was like this, but now it's like this. This is what I really believe, and so conversations like this and spreading the word and so forth will make people more aware. I know in my school it's accelerated. We've had nothing before, and it's really accelerated this year. There's a lot of pressure now as well to get things like this spoken about, talked about, structures and so forth. And so the school feel they're putting pressure on themselves, which is really good. Extremely supportive of everything that we're doing, and that's just positive. And so if we can get examples, like that out into the world, then hopefully more people will sort of think, well, we should be doing this as well.
Mhm.
So, Dana, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your enthusiasm and energy in this conversation. It was really enlightening, and I really look forward to more conversations in the future with you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great. And I'm looking forward to hearing all your different podcasts and recordings. I think this is a phenomenal idea. So keep it going.
Thank you. Thanks, Dana.
Thanks.